combing a crime scene for clues and turning them into evidence is guided by science.
Our goal is the pursuit of scientific truth, wherever that leads.
Which is why the real crime scene investigators are nothing like you see on TV.
It's not instant science as people might see on television.
In the real world, forensic science is a long, tedious process with checks and balances at every step. Another reality that rarely makes it into TV dramas is the mountains of research forensic teams rely on to do their jobs. In a murder investigation, for example, it's essential that investigators determine the time of death. They can use the stiffness of the body or its temperature as indicators, but only if the body is found relatively soon after death. Past that, you need the expertise of Dr. Neil Haskell, one of the world's leading forensic entomologists. He uses bugs found in corpses to determine the time of death. That's what forensic entomology is all about.
What we're looking for on the insects that we find on dead bodies, on corpses, are primarily the life stages of certain flies and beetles that will help us primarily determine time of death.
Bugs eat corpses, so the older the bug, the longer the body has been lying there. Once Dr. Haskell determines a maggot's age, he can work backwards and establish the time of death. Dr. Haskell finds all sorts of different insects on corpses, but the holy grail of forensic entomology is the blowfly.
I love them. I just love them. These are my girls.
Haskell uses the blowfly because its life cycle runs like clockwork. When a blowfly lays eggs, they'll transform into maggots within the first day. As a maggot feeds on the corpse and gets bigger, it sheds its outer skin. The maggot will grow a hard shell and transform into a pupa while safely inside. Depending on the species and the temperature, the adult blowfly emerges a few days later. If Dr. Haskell can determine the age of a fly plucked from a corpse, he'll be able to estimate the body's time of death. If a gun is used in a crime, forensic investigators have a few ways of tracking its owner. But even if they don't have a gun, the bullets will do.
When a bullet's fired down the barrel, any markings that are on the inside of the barrel are transferred in mirror image to the bullet. That's the thing we look for.
These markings are striation marks. When manufacturers make pistols, rifles, or revolvers, they cut a series of grooves into the hard steel barrel. These grooves spin the bullet as it comes out of the barrel, ensuring it flies in a straight line. With the wear and tear, the marks become the fingerprint of a gun. No two are the same. Another set of marks is created when the firing pin strikes the rear of the cartridge case. The impact leaves marks on the primer and sometimes on the rim of the case. Breach marks are created when the cartridge slams against the back of the weapon, imprinting microscopic marks on the casing. After the gun is fired, all that's left of the bullet is its case. Extractor and ejector marks are sometimes found on it. They're produced when the case pops out of the chamber. To check for marks, the identification unit runs a test fire.
You have to look at the test fires to make sure that there is a repeatable pattern that's being produced by the weapon, either with the cartridge casings or the projectiles that come out of the barrel as well.
You'd think a bullet would shoot straight through this tank, but the friction from the water is enough to slow this bullet down. What might have gone a mile through the air doesn't even get halfway down this tank. The bullet is recovered from the water and analyzed through a comparison microscope. Here, two objects can be viewed simultaneously. On the left is the bullet recovered at the crime scene. On the right, the bullet from the test firing.
Right now I'm looking at the breach marks that were put onto the casings by the gun. I'm trying to compare them, the test fires, to the evidence from the crime scene.
When guns are used in homicides, the fatal impact usually produces blood spatter patterns. In these cases, the evidence is literally written in blood. And the man who knows how to read it is Lieutenant Steve Cohn in Lafayette, Indiana. He's a blood spatter specialist.
We can go to the scene of the crime and actually analyze and possibly give answers right away to investigators.
Cohn studies the blood patterns left behind at crime scenes to give detectives a picture of what happened. If he can discover how the spatters were made, Steve can help determine how the crime was committed. Blood spatter patterns come in two main types: projected spatter and passive spatter. Stains can also be caused by transfer. Projected spatter results when a force hits a blood source. This can be low velocity impact, like a splash from a puddle, or medium velocity impact, like a hit from a baseball bat.
The head is a very blood-rich environment, and once blood starts to flow, and if it's impacted, you get this type of a violent reaction.
A gunshot wound produces an even more violent spatter. This pattern is categorized as a high-velocity impact spatter. Passive spatter is what's caused naturally, blood dripping down from a wound, flowing away, and pooling on the ground.
It's a good indication that somebody stood in one spot and bled. Was this the suspect's blood? Whenever we find passive blood at a scene, we become very interested in it, because a lot of times, especially in a knifing situation, the suspect will cut himself on his own knife, and we can collect that and compare his DNA to it.
Somewhere in this crime scene is the evidence that will put the perpetrators behind bars. Fusing science with detective work, forensic scientists have revolutionized the way criminals are caught and convicted. Their work would be impossible without computers. Unfortunately, the good guys aren't the only people with state-of-the-art technology. The problem is that criminals are going high-tech as well. So when computers are seized from a crime scene, they're treated with extra care. The first thing they do is pull out the hard drive. But wouldn't even the dumbest criminal know enough to simply delete anything incriminating? Well, the truth is that simply deleting a file doesn't remove it from your hard drive.
In most cases, the data associated with that file is still on the system, and it takes a little bit of work from us, but we can carve that data back out into the file that was there and present that deleted file in its original context.
Which means that the email a suspect sent, the documents he's written, and websites he's visited are still on that hard drive. Terry Aubin just has to find them. The first hurdle is cracking the password, which they don't even need technology to do.
It relies on the field investigator to do a good interview, to get passwords, to find out pets' names and kids' names and stuff like that, because that's typically a lot of times what people will use as passwords.
But criminals still have ways of covering their digital tracks. One way of hiding potentially incriminating evidence is called steganography. In the computer age, this means hiding a piece of information within digital files. Evidence criminals don't want investigators to find is intentionally mixed up with other pieces of data.
The image on the left is the original. You can see it's clear. If you look at the image on the right, where my cursor is, you see some pink and green and a little blue. So within that image, this is a secret message is hidden. And it does that by simply changing some of the bits and bytes within that data to hide this image. With steganography, you simply have a file, and unless you know that it has been altered, it's very hard to determine that there's a message hidden within that file.
Another method criminals use to keep evidence from the hands of investigators is called encryption.
Unlike steganography, where the message is actually hidden, when you use encryption, the message is not hidden. It's just converted into a format that's not easily readable.
And forensic investigators must break the code if they're going to get the evidence to court. But Terry Aubin always gets his data.